Tom Perkins is one of the founders of Kleiner Perkins Caulfield Buyers. They're one of the most successful venture capital firms in the country, and he has apparently lost his mind. But it's actually more of a symptom of the disease of the bubble that some of these billionaires live in, and he is in fact a billionaire, than it is about Tom Perkins. He recently wrote a letter to the Wall Street Journal saying that progressives were just like the Nazis. Let me quote him so that you understand, okay? He said, "I would call attention to the parallels of fascist Nazi Germany, to its war on its 1%, namely its Jews, to the progressive war on the American 1%, namely the rich." So now, of course, the Nazis killed 6 million Jews, right? They put them in concentration camps and gas chambers, etc. Now, the rich in this country, the 1%, not quite in that situation. In fact, I would argue that they're in the exact opposite situation, that they are literally the richest among us, that's by definition, and they seem to control the government. They keep getting more and more tax cuts, and right now they argue for even further corporate tax cuts on top of their personal income tax cuts. President Obama made Bush's tax cuts for the rich permanent for 94% of the dollars that come into the federal government, right? So the more they get money, the more they take advantages for themselves. There's the deregulation. They won't raise the minimum wage, and the list goes on and on. But in their insane world, it's the rich that are being discriminated against. They're the victims. They're just like the Jews during the Holocaust. He continues, "From the Occupy movement to the demonization of the rich embedded in virtually every word of our local paper, the San Francisco Chronicle, I perceive a rising tide of hatred of the successful 1%. Yeah, the Occupy movement, which has all this power in this country, is going to come for you, right? The Occupy movement in this country, unfortunately, has no power. In fact, it was your cops that the banks paid for in New York. Now, it was our tax money that goes to those cops, but the banks throw the nice parties for the police commissioner. They have the joint video headquarters in downtown where they monitor the Occupy movement, and they get the cops to throw the Occupy movement out. And as the media tries to tape that, they throw all this equipment, sound, lights, etc., so that none of it can be recorded. It's not the Occupy movement that's crushing people in this country, and that's taking those kind of Gestapo tactics and pepper spraying people in the face and throwing them out of public parks that they have every right to be in. It's people protecting the 1%. But in this guy's world, in his bubble, oh, the poor billionaires, they're so victimized. They have all that money and power, but every once in a while, somebody will do a protest about it. Oh my God. They're this close to Auschwitz. Now, that sounds outrageous, right? It sounds offensive when I said it. But he's the one saying it. He wrote it down. Wall Street Journal printed it. Here's another one. He says, "This is very dangerous drift in our American thinking. Kristallnacht was unthinkable in 1930. Is its descendant, progressive radicalism, unthinkable now? Kristallnacht's when they rounded up the Jews. Who's rounding up the rich other than to give them a pat on the ass? They're the guys who give the money to the politicians, and then they get exactly what they want from the politicians." This is disgusting, man. On this show, we say over and over again, look, not liking the rich is an absurd proposition. It depends on who they are. What do you mean? There's no reason not to like Oprah or your local doctor. I've said that a million times on the show, right? That isn't the problem. The problem is people who fix the rules so that they get all the advantages. So they pay, as Mitt Romney did, less than 13% in taxes, while their secretary pays twice as much as that. That's not a Kristallnacht on the rich. If anything, it's massive, disproportionate punishment of the poor and the middle class by the rich. And when you point that out, those are facts. When you point that out, they're like, "Oh, how dare you? I'm so victimized. Boo-hoo, look at me." While I was sitting in my insane wealth with the rules that I fixed in my favor, you didn't come and fluff me. So it's not to all the rich, but it's to the Tom Perkins of the world where our anger is directed, okay? And Tom, we're trying to change the political system. You think we're bad as progressives? You keep digging and slapping people across the face and saying absurd things like this, you're going to get something a hell of a lot worse than us. I hope you never do, and if you do, the person who's going to come and try to protect you is me, okay? Because progressives actually give a damn about everybody, and we want justice for everybody. But you, in your infinite arrogance, sit there and say that you're not treated well enough. Now, Kleiner Perkins is, of course, embarrassed by this, the company. They say Tom Perkins has not been involved in KPCB in years. We were shocked by his views expressed today in the Wall Street Journal and do not agree. Hardly anyone was willing to publicly say they agree, but of course, a lot of Wall Street feel this way, and you hear it in articles from time to time when they cry about what Obama's done to them, which I can't quite figure out what that is other than to give them more and more advantages. During that so-called economic recovery in 2010, 93% of the economic recovery went to the top 1%. Oh, they're this close to crystal knocked. They're closer to Cristal champagne than to crystal knocked. Nobody's coming for the top 1%. They're just sitting there having the time of their lives in this system that's designed to give them all the advantages. And this guy still cries. Now, after saying these absurd things, he must have at least walked it back a little bit once he realized what a jackass he was, right? Wrong. When Bloomberg News asked him about it, he doubled down and he said, in the Nazi area it was racial demonization, now it's class demonization. Tom, I ain't got nothing to do with your class. I don't give a damn about it. Look, there's nothing wrong with rich people. I've now said it 1,000,001 times. I've said on the show, I'd like to be rich. We'd all like to be rich. Who doesn't want to be rich? Of course. But what's not right is when you fix the goddamn rules and then you cry about it and say you didn't get enough. That's insane greed. And that's the bubble you live in.